like to call to order the regularly scheduled meeting of the Hillsborough County Historic Resources Review Board. Today we're meeting in person and would like to see if we have a quorum, do a quorum check.
Yes, sir, we have a quorum. I'd also like to mention that in addition to our in-person participation today, we are also joined by board member Nelson via WebEx, and we are also joined by Assistant County Attorney Nancy Takamori by WebEx.
Go ahead, Nancy. Did you have something to add?
Both logged in?
Nancy Takamori and Mary Noyes, as well as Charles Nelson.
Yes, correct. Okay, great. All right. And yes, sir, there is a quorum. We have 4 in-person attendees.
Are there any agenda changes or roster updates?
No, sir.
Okay. With that, we'll move on to regular meeting items. Mr. Hisney sent out the meetings to everyone. They're also included in your handouts from the last meeting. If you've had a chance to review them, does anyone want to make a motion to accept them, or are there any changes that need to be made?
I did have a correction. It shows that I attended and I was never ever successfully able to get dialed in.
I'm sorry, what was the correction?
That I wasn't present, I never got dialed in.
And you were at the meeting, sir?
I was not.
Was not at the meeting. Okay, we'll make that correction. Sorry.
With that change made, I would move to approve the minutes of that meeting of, hold on a minute, October 20th, or is that right? Yeah, the October 20th night 2020 meeting.
Oh, I just realized my mistake.
I see it.
The wrong minutes are included in your backup. The correct minutes were emailed to you.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
I see now. This says July 21st. I apologize for that.
Yeah,
Wrong minutes.
I did read the original ones.
Right.
I can see it's got July on the top and then October on the bottom.
Well, hold on. Let me see here. Oh, I'm sorry. They are the correct minutes. It's the
Right.
wrong date.
Right.
Correct minutes, wrong date. Apologize for that very much. Sorry. Okay. Yeah. Otherwise, they are the correct minutes. Yes. So the other change will be to change the date.
Do we have a second to Becky's?
Could you repeat that, Mr. Nelson?
Yes, I'll second that motion.
So is there any discussion? If not, is everyone in favor, say aye.
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 Who seconded the motion?
Mr. Nelson.
Who?
Mr. Nelson.
Mr. Nelson. Okay, great. Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving on to regular meeting items number B. I believe I was told there was no public comment, announcement, or guest speakers. Is that correct? Correct. Okay, thank you. With that, we'll move to item C, staff items. Mr. Hisney, would you like to talk about the 2019-20 CLG report?
Yes, for information purposes only, I've submitted a copy of our annual CLG report that we submit to the state every year. The report is what we submitted. I did not include the minutes, the agendas and the minutes for every meeting we held in your backup just to save paper, but they all were included in the report that was sent to the state. And as you can see from the email from Ruben Acosta, that the report was accepted and meets the annual meeting reporting requirement. And again, that was just for informational purposes.
Thank you. Okay, we will move on to agenda item D, board items. The first one is rezoning 20-1252 of 525 South Kings designated landmark.
All right, so before we introduce the applicant, as I had explained in an earlier email to you this week, we have 2 related items, item D1 and item D2. They both pertain to the designated landmark located at 525 South Kings Avenue. and that is actually the name of the landmark, 525 South Kings Avenue. And the property owner is proposing a rezoning, and then, which of course, if the rezoning is ultimately approved, it would be followed by a redevelopment of the site. With regards to, these items are separated because when it comes to the rezoning of the property, the authority to approve or deny a rezoning rests solely with the Board of County Commissioners. So with regards to the rezoning, your role today would be to render a finding of whether the proposed rezoning poses no effect or an adverse effect on the historic resource. And that finding then, determination will be forwarded to the rezoning review staff and taken into consideration by them, by the zoning hearing master, and ultimately by the Board of County Commissioners. So that's the first item, is the rezoning. The second item deals with the proposed redevelopment of the site if the rezoning is approved. Because it is a designated landmark, this board actually has authority over external improvements to the site. The designation, as you saw in your reports that I had sent you and provided a copy today, the designation comprises the entire property. So you do have authority to approve or deny the certificate of appropriateness for the various improvements that are proposed on the site. Admittedly, it's kind of an awkward situation. Usually when you're doing a COA, that's all there is to it. There's not an accompanying rezoning. So it is kind of an awkward situation, but that is how we have to divvy up these reviews. So we're going to start with the rezoning, and again, your role here is to make a determination of no effect or adverse effect. Before I introduce the applicant's representative who's sitting in the audience, this rezoning, RZ 20-1252, is to rezone 2 folios. The folio in which the historic resource is located and the adjacent property as well. The request is to rezone both properties to BPO. This stands for Business and Professional, it's to rezone it to Planned Development. The property to the north is zoned BPO, which is a Business and Professional Office District, and the historic site is zoned SPI-HC. SPI is a special zoning district, a special public interest district that we have for historic landmarks, which provides for limited commercial activities on the site. This district was created in order to be able to provide a revenue stream for owners of designated properties, historic landmarks, to help maintain those properties. So the proposed rezoning will join both parcels together in what's called a planned development rezoning. Planned development rezonings have a site plan associated with them as well as conditions of approval. The historic structure at 525 Kings Avenue is proposed to remain, and the uses that will be allowed in that building under the PD rezoning will be the same uses that are allowed today, which would be residential and then limited commercial uses like a boutique, things like that. And this property, since its designation, has been utilized for a boutique and similar type uses. The property to the north, they're going to construct an 8,000 square foot 2-story building, and that's proposed for medical office and medical laboratories. And finally, there is an existing storage building that's on the historic property that's located to the rear of the historic property. That building is to be demolished as part of the proposed redevelopment. I would point out that building is not a contributing structure to the landmark designation. The rezoning application is scheduled to be heard at the January 19th, 2021 zoning hearing master meeting. It will then be scheduled afterwards for final hearing by the Board of County Commissioners for approval. So with that, unless you have any questions for me, we have in our audience Chris Mcneil of Mcneil Engineering. He is representing the applicant in this, and he will provide all the details you need, if any. He has a presentation, I believe, and certainly these presentations for this and the site development will overlap to some degree. But Chris, you have the stage.
Thank you, Mr. Hisney. I appreciate that. Just to add to that introduction, I just want to point out, and I don't know if you have these in your packet or not, but just the location of where the project is just south of State Road 60 off of Kings Avenue. The site development plan.
Chris, you need to speak into the mic as
Yes,
much as
sir.
possible, please.
There you go. The site development plan that we were talking about, this is a work in progress as we've been working through several items with staff. But the parcel that we're talking about is this, the half piece on the south with the historic building in the front. And currently existing behind that is a parking area with a storage unit, a storage building, which Tom had referenced. Is not part of it is on the historic lot, but it's not a historic building.
Correct. It's not a contributing structure to the designation.
Okay. The existing structure looks somewhat like this. Well, that is actually the picture of the building, but we've shown, added in what the driveway would look like on the south side and the parking lot on the north, with the building kind of ghosted in the back. I'm going to show you another picture that will give you an idea of what's behind there. This is from the backyard behind the structure on the north, looking to the east. Large medical building back there. This is a view for perspective of the storage building that's behind the historic building, and with the medical building behind it, is recently constructed. Another view from this corner, looking back to the northeast. So you can see the storage building here in the front. So it's a little bit similar perspective there. And then this one's from the front, looking across there's an existing structure to the north of the historic building. This one that is also proposed to be demolished, but it's off the site. And this last photo I wanted to show you is from the front, where you can see the historic structure on the right, the storage in the back, and the medical building behind it, and then the structure to the left, which is off-site, but all part of the same PD plan. There was initially a proposal in the plan to adjust the handicap entrance in the front, or to make that. I just want to make sure I clear that up, that that's not the intent any longer. We were able to work with the grades in the back behind the building where the existing ramp comes down, to allow that to be slightly modified so it could tie into the proposed parking lot. That is not reflected on the latest plan, but it is reflected in the images that we've provided for the elevations. That's shown here with the existing ramp to tie into the new parking lot. So less of a modification to where we didn't have to do an extension of a ramp or anything like that. And also in the front of the building, where you can see we were talking initially about making a ramp to be able to come in the front, but that's all going to stay the same, so AD access would be as it is existing. And with that, I'd like to conclude. If anybody has any questions, be happy to take them. I'm also joined by the owner, Cindy Barca, and the developer, Jimmy Stevens, if you have any questions for them.
Go ahead, Charles.
Yes. Thank you very much for that presentation. My name is Charlie Nelson. I'm off-site today. Before I ask my question, I suppose I have a question for Nancy Takamori. Does our oversight of this particular property extend to the surrounding land, even though that storage structure was a non-contributing structure? Does our oversight extend to that area as well? I think she's muted.
Nancy, you're muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now.
Okay. So in this instance, on the rezoning, you are determining whether, there's no effect or an adverse effect, but you're looking at the landmark property, which includes the entire lot. It covers the entire folio. So it would allow you to consider the effect of the non-contributing structures on the home itself or the building itself.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I guess that does lead me to the question then. I understand that the current zoning allows for limited commercial use. Would that include a parking lot at the back end of the structure already in the existing zoning? Because it seems to me that what you're doing is to remove the structure and make that a parking lot. In determining whether a parking lot that might potentially be fairly well used would have any adverse effect on the structure would seem to flow from that question. So could you talk a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, the current SBIHC zoning of the property, of the landmark property, and to be clear, the landmark designation only covers the southern half of the property that's proposed for rezoning. The north half, which is currently zoned PPO, is not part of the landmark designation. But yes, as an SPIHC zoning, which is permitted limited commercial uses, yes, a parking lot is a permissible use. The parking lot design would have been subject to review of the HRB, but yes, a parking lot would be allowed. You would have to provide parking under the code for commercial use. There are standards under the code for that. And in fact, a good deal of the property is currently developed with a parking lot that is, Mr. Mcneil can describe what it's surfaced with. I'm not sure that it's asphalt, but there was photos provided for when we get to the COA portion of this, showing existing conditions of the site. If Mr. Mcneil would like to maybe share those, and you'll see that much of the site is indeed paved with some material for parking.
Mr. Hisney, just to show you maybe a little bit better what Mr. Hisney is describing is I've outlined roughly the parcel in red that we're talking about, and this is generally the location of the storage building in the back, and everything in between and along this side and in through here, all of this is currently parking lot. And the finish of it currently is recycled asphalt, gravel. It's a mix of things that's been maintained over the years.
Claire, thank you. That's a very good illustration. So the new parking area would not significantly alter what the current parking lot's being used for. So it would be towards the back of the property then.
That's exactly correct. It would basically, just in general terms, be replacing the storage building with parking. Parking.
That answers my questions, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any other questions?
So right now, there's about 3 or 4 parking spaces?
No, sir, there's my X is probably, or box here is a little big. If I was to take it a little better, the parking is along this area and along the front of the building. and these two parcels do somewhat work together through parking. So this would be pretty much the limits of that parking currently. It's been there quite a while, so it's in its existing state, doesn't actually meet regulation. Some of the spaces are not the exact size, and the drive aisles aren't either, but that's how it's used. And that's one of the things that we're would be adjusting with the PD plan as well. Obviously, bringing those up to code so they're safer.
Guess I'm a little confused as to the two different folios. The one folio that you had the picture of up there earlier, that showed the existing historic and two parking lots, basically. Are you going back to that?
Sure.
Can you go back to that on the,
A photo, was it?
yeah, the diagram here?
Oh, okay, sure. So this I'll try to draw it on here as well. This is the second parcel to the north, and the building that is on this location currently in the front. And it has a loop drive that comes
But
around.
that's not the historic building.
That's correct. This is part of the PD, but not part of what we're talking about at the moment, I believe.
So
We're mainly focused
the
inside.
historic building is this one on the top upper right,
Historic buildings lower left.
on the
Yeah,
left?
right here.
There, okay. See, this is so tiny, I thought we'd have a better picture of it to see.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a historic.
If you look through the backup in your books, that's per item D2, it has pictures of the site from every direction, and it might help you orient and also get an idea of the existing conditions of the site. So if you would flip back to D2, and maybe Chris also has these, you'll see that the photos start with a photo of the front or west elevation and then work their way around the house. And you can also see the existing parking lot and materials. Now, the parking lot that's there, as Chris mentioned, it doesn't have defined spaces, so it doesn't comply with current parking requirements, which, of course, a new parking lot will. But perhaps that'll help you orient yourself to the site and existing conditions on the site.
So is the only demolition the old storage?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. For this parcel.
And that's all
This photo is really kind of gives you the best perspective, I think, of the site. This is looking between the historic building on the right and the existing structure on the left, and you can see the storage building in the back, as well as the new medical office building behind it. So this is roughly standing on the property line, on the driveway that services the historic building, one of the two driveways that services historic.
Picture we're looking at right here, which is very good. The new medical building will be in that green grassy area back towards the left of the properties, the other property.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Can you point at that? You're talking about,
It'd be
There,
right behind
okay.
this building. This building will be demolished and it would be
Okay.
placed behind it, in between that and the off-site medical building. So that's the existing building that would be torn down. This would be the new medical building behind it, and you can see back here for reference, this is the new medical building in the background. That picture was taken standing there, looking that way.
well, just looking at it all from my perspective, it doesn't look like, or it does look like that the historic part of it has already been contaminated to some degree by the other big medical building already built there. And the storage areas and that other building you're going to demolish don't seem to have any historic appearance at all to them. So we'd be isolating it down to just the one historic building and then the new medical building and a whole lot of parking. Is that what I'm seeing?
It'd be more parking. I don't know that it would be a whole lot. I like the idea of this just because of exactly what you said. The building next door is very contemporary. It looks like it may have been built in the 80s, doesn't match. With the getting that away from the historic building, I think it makes it stand out. There won't be anything else up on the right-of-way at that point. It'll be able to stand out and you'll be able to have better visibility.
And what's the plan with the historic building to continue to use it the way it's being used?
Ideally, as Mr. Hisney had commented, it would have a variety of uses, but the current intent of the use that we would like to obtain would be used for office or medical. We would see some professional being in that building. I would love to be down there if I was in that part of the county. I think the building looks wonderful, and they're talking about making it, freshen it up as part of this project as well. So all those things, I think, make it look better. The building, the new building and the medical building would also be much more complementary to it than it would be than the existing structures that are there, the storage in the building next door.
Chris, excuse me, on that point, Brian Grady, who's reviewing this, advised me that at present, the proposed use of the historic structure is only those uses that are presently allowed, and that at present, office uses are not proposed in the historic structure. But if that's not correct, then...
Well, Brian is correct. That is what the initial applicant was, but after working through some transportation comments that we had discussed that that's what ultimately we wanted to use it for. We were able to work through those details with transportation, and so now when we come back in with the revised, because this had to be continued for this meeting, once we come back in, we'll be proposing that use to be in.
Oh, okay. So in addition to the existing light commercial, limited commercial uses, you would also be proposing office uses?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Wasn't the property previously used for nonprofit offices?
No, it's a boutique.
That's a good question. No, ma'am. No, sir.
Yeah, the SBIHC zoning does not require it to be nonprofit.
No, I just mean
Do we lose any sort of protections or anything by going from SPIHC to PD with the building?
No, certainly when it comes to any improvements made on this site, that, let's say in the future, if they want to change improvements as a designated landmark, it will remain under your purview through a certificate of appropriateness. The one thing that a PD does lend itself to is that it is subject to an approved site plan and also to approved conditions. So in the regard that there is an approved site plan in place with the PD, if they wanted to make changes to that site plan, then that if they involve this portion of the PD, would come back to this board for review, both in the preliminary stage, like this rezoning, and then the improvements themselves. So.
Okay, thank you.
So are there 2 or 3 different phases to this whole process that they're trying to do? Tom, I'm trying to understand, so are there 3 different phases of this whole portfolio they're trying to do here?
Don't understand what you mean by
Well,
phases.
today they're trying to get just the zoning change done on this.
Well, there's 2 things. Again, the rezoning is going through the rezoning hearing process. Your involvement in the rezoning portion
Is effect or no effect?
Yes, that'll be the limit of your involvement in the rezoning process. While they're here, and because a PD zoning involves a site plan, And that site plan proposes improvements to the historic property. They're also here for a COA on various improvements, which would be which is going to be the proposed parking lot, the demolition of the garage, the replacement of the handicap ramp on the back of the building, and then they're also proposing to replace the asphalt roof with a metal roof. So today, you'll actually be making a ruling on the COA, and certainly there's a fair degree of overlap with the PD zoning, but so those are the two things you're doing today. If you approve the COA and the rezoning is approved by the board, then they would not be coming back to this body unless they were going to change plans or propose some further improvement or change to the historic structure, because you will retain authority over the changes, physical changes to the property on the south half of the PD, because that is remaining as a designated historic landmark.
So on the other piece, has the medical building already been approved?
No, ma'am, that's part of the PD rezoning.
Okay.
Now, but the current zoning of the property to the north is BPO. It allows medical offices, professional offices, because this is adjacent. So let's say they just wanted to redevelop the BPO property under its current zoning. Because it's adjacent to a landmark, we should get notified of it, and you'd have some opportunity to just render a finding of effect or no adverse effect of that development, but no other opportunity to affect what's going on in that other property. They have a BPO zoning. And actually, I believe when it got rezoned BPO, it actually came in front of this board.
It did.
And Ms. Barson can remind me if I'm correct. It actually came in front of this board, and you rendered a finding of no adverse effect to have an office zoning on the adjacent parcel.
So if the zoning change were not made, would the improvements still be made?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
If the zoning change was not made by the commissioners, would the second half, those improvements to the building still be made?
Well, much of it would be obviated. One thing that's driving this rezoning is that what started the conversation for the rezoning is they want to provide parking for the medical uses on the BPO property, but they wanted to provide it on this property, some of the parking. Well, under the code, the Land Development Code says that the property where parking is located must permit the use that the parking is serving. The SPI HC zoning does not permit medical uses. So they could not put parking on the historic site to serve the offices. If that were allowed, then they would still have come here for a COA approval for the portion of the parking on the historic site. But it's not allowed under the code, and that's a general rule for all properties. It's not historic properties.
Well, I think what you're talking about gets to the backstory of where they're going with this. To get the folio together gives them that opportunity to have the parking for the.
Correct.
Right.
Under the plan development,
that's a
it would
piece of
erase
this that was
that
sort of missing
zoning
here.
issue to where parking's not allowed. So the parking then would be allowed on the historic site to serve both the historic site and the office site. That's correct.
What you're talking about there is the rub for me. It seems that the only effect or non-effect for us is to add parking for a building next door. It seems like that's really what we're talking about here, and that seems like a small step towards a path that could be in effect at some point in the future. I just make that comment. Doesn't mean I'm going to vote no against the project, but it does feel like a step down a path of a potential effect to our structure.
What I was trying to understand about it was where it was going, because it seemed to be going in circles here. You know, the fact that the two buildings that would be eventually demolished, being the storage shed and the other building, have no historic value whatsoever. almost thinking off the top of my head that it does improve the historic building appearance if they were to keep that historic building.
And allow me to remind the board that at an earlier testimony, that in addition to the parking lot, which is a very major portion of the rezoning, Mr. Mcneil has indicated that they're also going to amend the PD application to allow office uses in the historic structure along with the currently permitted limited commercial uses. So that now is an element of this that was just stated today.
Well, I don't know if anybody else or anything, but I would maybe go ahead and make a recommendation on that to approve that it has no adverse effect at this point, just because of the points I already made about the other buildings are actually not helping it look historic. They're actually detouring, a detriment to the appearance of the historic building. And I think it might actually improve it in the long run if it's not like Mr. Nelson was saying, going to be just a stepping stone, a parking lot to build something and do something else. I don't know how else to say that.
It may not have an adverse effect, and I think we see it differently. I don't think it has a positive effect.
Or it has no effect.
Yeah, it would be no effect or an adverse effect. So, Ms. Perry, I think the motion is that it has no effect for the reason you described, correct?
That was my motion, but
Yes, ma'am.
it's up for discussion at this point.
Is there any discussion points around her motion?
The owner would like to say something if that's possible.
Sure.
I have to get used to talking in this mask. But when I purchased this house, it didn't have a roof. It didn't have a floor. You couldn't see it. It was a drug pit. That's all that was in there were drug addicts. I put money in it. I ran businesses and lost money in it. My medical background, I'm a surgery center administrator, and I know medicine. That office, I rode through Plant City, Ybor City. I saw beautiful offices. We have COVID. I can't open a business in it. The basic medical building behind has taken over everything. The warehouse is awful. I'm trying to, I love that building. My heart and soul's in that building. I put hundreds of thousands of dollars in that building. I'm very pro the Historic Society. And in my eyes, taking 3 or 4 parking spots that's already existent, that we use all the time. When I do charity events or any kind of functions out there, which I do all the time, 1,500 people came through there when I did Christmas a few years ago, because I'm very, very community oriented. But improving it to the point that it's gorgeous and putting a beautiful office in it and having things that I can still use it and do the things that I need to do is all I'm really asking. We're surrounded, another 100,000 of medical offices is going to the north of us, I think, or no, the south of us. So we're gonna be covered with medicine. I'm a nurse, I've given up my license, but that's what I've worked in my entire life. So it's, to me, a compliment, and I can do more and work out of that, and that will be my office mostly. Anybody that knows me knows that house. So I love that house. So I just ask you to really look at this whole project differently than just a historic house with the medical office behind it, because I love that building, and if there's anything I can do to convince you of that, just ask me.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much.
So we have one current motion. Are there discussion around that motion, a different motion, or a second for that motion?
Motion.
Could you repeat that, sir?
Yes, I'll second the motion. Charlie Nelson.
Is there any further discussion, or are you guys ready to vote on the motion? Okay, no further discussion. All in favor of the motion that the rezoning poses no adverse effect, say aye.
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 All opposed?
Nay.
And it sounds like the motion passed.
All right, so the next item before you then deals with the actual improvements of the property. Obviously, much of the testimony that was already presented is applicable to this. The changes that are proposed, physical changes to the historic property are a demolition of the structure, the accessory structure, provision of paved parking on the property, and replacement of the handicap ramp that currently exists on the historic structure. And then lastly, they want to replace the asphalt roof with a metal roof. If you look through the photos that are part of your back material for D2, you have a view of the front or west elevation. You have a view of the south side elevation, the rear or east elevation, and that elevation shows the existing handicap ramp. You also have a view of the north side elevation, which shows the porte cochere on the property that Mr. Mcneil had earlier stated that they wish to keep. The report, designation report referenced this as a porte cochere that was evidently built to accommodate carriages because it's too narrow for a car. And there's a hook that appears to have been where you would tie up the reins of the horses. Also, there's a picture of the shed to be removed. In all of these photos, you'll see the existing parking lot and the material. Again, it's not a structured parking lot, but it does cover most of the site, the rear and the side. And then you have the proposed site plan again. You then have a page with 4 elevations. These elevations show the proposed ADA ramp, and confirm that's the case. This is the proposed ADA ramp in the elevations you submitted, correct? Yes, sir. Because it says proposed new ADA ramp at existing house. So that would be the proposed ramp. And again, that is going to remain at the rear of the house, not on the side. Then the last 2 photos are renderings of the property, which show what it would look like with the new parking that's going to be installed. Also, some landscaping that will be required along the front of the property. It does not show the metal roof, though. And then the last attachments there in your backup, they have committed to this roof material. In the earlier backup I sent you, I had identified that they were looking to perhaps have an option of an equivalent product. That I was concerned about that sort of option. They have changed their request, and this is the literal actual roof that would be installed on the structure, and it would be in the natural galvanized finish. So those are the improvements on the site that are the subject of the certificate of appropriateness, which you do have authority to approve or deny.
So I guess that goes back to my earlier question. If the zoning weren't approved, would our vote still allow them to put the metal roofing on and the new handicap access?
Well, the one thing you could do is if the rezoning is not approved, if you want to condition the COA to, let's say, you approve all that's proposed, but if the rezoning is not approved, that, let's say, the parking is not approved. I mean, you could put a restriction on it to say that the COA, if the rezoning is not approved, is only in effect for the roof and maybe the new handicap ramp, if you wanted to go that route. Again, let me note, though, that if the rezoning is not approved, parking on this site to serve the office uses on the adjacent property, it would not be allowed by zoning. Before going farther, Mr. Mcneil, do you have a further presentation dealing more in detail with the site improvements?
Just a couple comments. One, the rendering does say new ADA ramp, but it is desired to keep as much of that as we can, if possible. In the back would, like I said, at the initial time, we thought we might have to return and travel along the north side of the building. But after a further review with the developer, we were able to figure out a way to tie that in with the existing, with some minor modification.
Okay, so your request is, this depicts what the ramp will
What it would look like.
but it's essentially the same ramp?
That's correct.
Okay, but it would look like this when
It
it's
would, yes,
done,
sir. Right.
fixing it up or whatever modifications, this was what it would look like?
That's correct.
Great,
And I
that's
have
what
a
they
photo
need,
of
yeah. Okay, so this would be what it looks like
Right.
with the modifications proposed to the existing ramp.
The second thing I'd like to comment on is the roof is in need of repair. It is in rough shape, and we do need, if there were any conditions, we would obviously want that to be addressed, not held up there.
What is the current roof?
Of material,
Yeah.
asphalt shingle.
Do we have any kind of age on it?
I originally took a metal roof off of it, and the asphalt shingles were replaced when I first bought it, because there were big holes in roof.
So originally it had a metal.
Yes, if you look back at the old pictures, I'm just going back to the originals
Right,
and trying to
right.
have the same, concept. So
I'm
it
not familiar with this kind of roofing. I'm familiar with
It-
metal roofing, V-crimp, stuff like that, but
Yeah.
how does, tell me the architect.
That's a commercial, not a residential roof, and that matches the new building. And that's why I felt like, the new concept of the new building, I tried to get something that would complement the historic building. And so that's why we chose that metal roof for that building instead of like something else.
I guess I'm not questioning a metal roof. That's why I'm just trying to understand this product a little better.
I have never
Does
seen
anyone?
I've never seen the product.
Here we go.
I'm not a contractor.
You mentioned a 5V crimp, which is the
Yeah.
old style. It's
Right.
exposed fasteners. This is a covered fastener. So basically, it's got one strip. There's another one that comes over and closes the top of it. Says no fasteners exposed. It's the only difference in the metals themselves.
And still the tie downs underneath and all that stuff.
Oh, yes, it's still screwed down the same and everything, but it's screwed down where it'll be covered by the next panel. So when you look at the roof, you won't see anything. It's more of a commercial. I use it on residential houses too. So it's really not a commercial or residential. I don't know if that explains what your question was.
Well, yeah, I was just trying to understand it because it looked like there was hardly any seaming at all, and I was wondering how that's probably what they wanted, is no seam look, so.
Yeah, it makes it more effective, is less chance of leaking, less chances of problems. With the screws that are exposed, they can back out, it'll leak down where the screw hole is. So this is it's a better system.
Just a modern day version. of
Yeah,
that.
you could say that. They still use a lot of the exposed fasteners, it's just not as long-lasting. Good.
Could we have your name for the record, sir?
Jim Stevens,
Jim Stevens?
yes.
And you're with which firm?
I'm the developer and investor.
Developer, okay. And then just for my notes, so on the backup for the roof, it says that it's 16-inch wide panels and a 2-inch rib height, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And that's what this roof
That's
would be if
typical.
you install it. So this is the exact description of the roof.
Right.
Thank you.
So what does the wording of the motion need to be to accomplish that, they get the full COA if they have the zoning approval, and if they don't, they have the permission for the roof.
Yeah, the motion would be to approve redevelopment of the site as proposed in the COA application, including demolition of the existing storage building, installation of new and expanded parking with asphalt, repair of the handicap ramp in the rear, consistent with the elevations, and then finally, replacement of the roof with a new metal roof, which is the VSR2 architectural roof system, et cetera, that's found in the backup. So those are the four components of the COA that they seek to have approved.
Okay, I'll make that motion. I just want to make sure that they're protected both ways, so that they don't have to come back.
We appreciate that.
So the motion has been made.
I
to-
second.
To approve the COA
But don't ask me to repeat it.
with a condition on the parking lot and destruction of the shed contingent upon the rezoning. Is there any additional discussion around that?
Question, Mr. Chairman. The color scheme for the new roof, is it similar to the new building being constructed? Similar to what was there before? What's this color scheme of this new roof?
The proposed color is galvanized.
It's coordinated with the building, but it also is similar to the original that was taken off. It's, like shades lighter or something, but very close.
Thank you.
I'd like to just see if there's any additional discussions or questions before we vote. Okay, the motion to approve the COA with the 4 points being the new roof, the repair of the ADA ramp, the removal of the shed, and the repaving of the parking lot with the condition of the shed and parking lot being dependent upon the rezone. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Mcneil?
Thank you. With that, I believe that's the last board item. Section E, new business. Do we have any new business?
No, sir.
No new business. According to this, our next tentatively scheduled meeting is January 19th, 2021 at 3 p.m. I guess.
And on that point, I will be preparing a schedule. That date is the third Tuesday of the month. That is the regularly scheduled meeting date. Unfortunately, for reasons dealing with communication staffing of these hybrid meetings, because we have a virtual component, they have to staff this meeting. However, they're super busy and stretched really thin. And so, for instance, the reason your November meeting was canceled is because they were called to other duties and could not cover this meeting and next. So, yes, your regular schedule is the third Tuesday of every month. Hopefully, we'll be able to keep that.
Sure.
Once we return to normal conditions where it's just a live meeting, communications, all they do is record the meeting. There's no virtual component. So we'll be able to go back to our regular schedule. But I just want to say that there's no guarantee it'll be January 19th, because if there ends up being a conflict with a Board of County Commissions meeting or something like that, then we could very well get rescheduled again. But at least for now, and I'll be sending you the schedule with the actual dates, but at least pencil off the third Tuesday of every month at 3 o'clock for now. Okay?
All right, thank you. At this point, if there's no additional business or items to discuss, I will adjourn the meeting.